Hi, you're watching Classical Concert Review with Andy Wilding. Today I'm talking to Kathleen Tagg and David Krakauer. Great to have you guys back in Cape Town. What have you been up to, and what are your plans?
Hi, well, I'm Kathleen Tagg, and I am sitting now in Cape Town looking out over the gorgeous, gorgeous False Bay. We're spotting for whales as we chat today, Andy, so that's what we're doing. I'm a pianist and a producer, an arranger, composer, and these next few days we have arrived in Cape Town to do some concerts at the Edinburgh Hall, the Baxter Concert Hall, and at Heidelberg Estate in Paarl. And we've just come down from 2 mind-blowing days in Kruger National Park up in the north of South Africa. As before that, I had a week of concerts, a morning concert in Cape Town and something in Joburg at the Venda Auditorium, which is the most beautiful auditorium, and at Tagg in Pretoria. So I've been doing that, and before that, I just came over from New York, which is where I live, and yeah, New York and yeah, moving around the country, around the US, LA, and New York for the last while. So that's me.
Hi, and I'm David Krakauer. I'm a clarinetist, a composer, band leader, and just delighted to be back here in South Africa. I'm a native New Yorker, so for me to come to South Africa to actually see, a zebra or a rhino or an elephant standing in the road as we drive by and not behind a cage is actually pretty mind-blowing. So that's amazing, and also looking out the window here in Cape Town is just incredible. This is my 4th time in South Africa, and it really has been absolutely amazing. And I'm looking forward to these 3 concerts the next 3 days, tomorrow, the day after that, here in South Africa. And then I'm off to a series of concerts in early October in Germany as part of a festival called the Multiphonics Festival, and that's with my band Ancestral Groove. And then I'll be in Vienna for a few days, working on a new project and collaborating with some musicians over there. So yeah, it's an exciting time, as always, and keep it all going.
Great. Well, it's so good to have caught you when you're in Cape Town, and good to have you here. And tell us a bit about the program. It sounds like quite a packed couple of days that you're having. Nice to hear that you've had a bit of time to sit down, and I hope you get to see some whales. Tell us about the Messian. Interesting story behind that, the Quartet for the End of Time.
Well, yes, we'll be doing a program that involves us, clarinet, piano, and then 2 wonderful South African string players, Peter and Suzanne Martins, on violin and cello. And that's the basic combination. In the first half of the spring program, this will be on Friday and Saturday night at the Edinburgh Hall and Baxter Concert Hall, respectively. It centers around the Messiaen Quartet for the End of Time, and I'll let David tell you a little bit about that.
Yes, so the Messiaen Quartet for the End of Time was composed in 1940 in a prisoner of war camp. The great French composer Olivier Messiaen was taken prisoner by the German army, and while he was in the camp, he met a friend of his, a clarinet player. So Messiaen decided to write a piece for him, which is called The Abyss of the Birds. And this piece later became the 3rd movement of this monumental work, the Quartet for the End of Time, because then Messiaen and this clarinet player, Henri Akota, were transferred to another camp, and there they met a violinist and a cellist. And Messiaen, of course, was a tremendous pianist, so he decided to write a quartet for that instrumentation. And of course, during World War II, those must have seemed like the end of the world, apocalyptic times. So Messiaen did, as a devout Catholic, he composed this huge 50-minute work, which really has a programmatic story about the end of the world, the apocalypse, like the great apocalyptic scenes, you know, in the doorways of the Chartres or the great Hieronymus Bosch paintings. This is one of those great masterworks where that kind of apocalypse, last judgment is portrayed. But the piece is also has a tremendous, is tremendously beautiful, and I think it transcends the programmatic story. Obviously, you feel this incredible, how can I say, tumultuous quality of the piece. But it isn't a religious diatribe. It transcends any specific religion. It could be Buddhist. You know, it's an amazing work about just humans caught in tremendous conflagration and apocalyptic conditions. So it's really quite an amazing work.
But there are also
Sorry, it sounds like you based it a lot on the. I mean, is it a Revelations, a Book of Revelations reference at all?
I think so. With the trumpets and the angels coming for the end of time and announcing the end of time. But then there's also these incredibly beautiful string movements, the slow ones, which are dealing with the immortality of the infant Jesus, and they're so loving and tender, and there's an incredibly beautiful stillness that sits there, and when you're playing it literally feels as if time stops. It's the strangest sensation to sit and play those things, because you time just loses its sense of reference when you're in that. So it's a remarkable work, in the way he's been able to work with material to get those effects.
It sounds really stunning. When was the last time you played it? Have you been performing it before?
Well, I've probably played the piece about 100 times myself over the years. Kathy and I performed it a few months ago together in California with our very good friend, the wonderful cellist Matt Heimovitz, and also with a wonderful violinist from the Bay Area, Kay Stern. So that was a great experience, and it's for me. I've had so many experiences playing the work, and I remember one time, you know, the piece finishes with this gorgeous violin movement, and the violin just ends, and basically the top of the instrument on a high harmonic, and just this, and the piano playing these chords that are like heartbeats, and it's just earth-shattering. And I remember we played it, and then we went off stage, and the violinist burst into tears, because it was just all this emotion, tremendous emotion that was pent up, and you sort of speech it out over 50 minutes. And you know, I have so many stories around this piece, just personal stories around this piece. It brings up all these emotions.
Sounds like a roller coaster. Well, we're looking forward to it. And what are the dates of that concert? That's Stellenbosch, is it? And Cape Town.
Yes, so that will be on the Endler Concert Hall series on Friday the 26th. That's
tomorrow.
And on Saturday, it's for the Cape Town Concert Club at the Baxter Concert Hall, and that's at 8 p.m. on Saturday night, the 27th. And then the second half after that concert, we'll then have another work which was also influenced by a wonderful clarinetist, and that's the Brahms trio, and going into a klezmer set of works which David is known for. So we'll keep talking about that, if that's of interest.
Well, the thing is that then we saw this sort of common theme that brought all of these works together, and that is the clarinet, but not just, oh, these are good pieces, wonderful pieces, amazing pieces for clarinet. I mean, it's not merely that. It's that there was this tremendous emotional connection with the clarinet. So, for example, the Messiaen Quartet, Messiaen composing the Abyss of Birds for the specific clarinetist. And the Abyss of the Birds is a dialogue between darkness and light. The abyss is human sadness and suffering, and birds are light and happiness and joy. And so that's the philosophical discussion within this great quartet for the end of time. And then the Brahms trio was, Brahms had retired from composing, and then he met a wonderful clarinetist named Richard Neufeld. And when he heard this man play, it awakened all these emotions inside of him, because he was completely burned out. He had written to his publisher, "I'm done, I'm going to just take it easy." And then he heard this man, Richard Neufeld, and then he went ahead and wrote 4 masterpieces for the clarinet, because, again, some tremendous emotions were stirred up inside of him. And then klezmer music, for me, the music of my ancestors who came from Poland and Russia and Belarus, and they came to the United States in the early 20th century. But that culture was completely abandoned by my family. But somehow, that sound, when I became clarinetist, you know, I didn't know that. But then later in life, in my early 30s, I decided to play this music of my ancestors, and I think it was that clarinet sound was so appealing and strong, and also very, very emotional and powerful and gut-wrenching. I thought, this is a perfect vehicle for my instrument. So all of this really is, I guess, the main theme for the Endler and the Baxter concerts are the emotional power of the clarinet and emotional connections through the clarinet. I think that's what brings all this music together.
So can I understand this, that the Brahms is part of the same concept as the Messiaen, or is that a different one?
Yes. So the first half is the Messiaen, which is, you know, it's an epic 50-minute piece. It's huge work, and then after the intermission we'll do the Brahms trio with Peter Martins on cello, and follow it then with a set of klezmer tunes that was arranged specifically for this concert.
All right, and then the other concert is the Niederberg. Now this sounds very interesting, and you understand that that's a separate program. Tell us about the Niederberg idea and the concept behind it.
Well, so that concert is going to be a duo concert. It's just clarinet and piano. It'll be on Sunday, the 28th, out in Paarl at the beautiful Niederberg estate. And that concert is going to be completely different, because it has sort of a classical first half and a second half where we actually experiment and play around completely. So the first half is a piece by Janacek, followed by Debussy's Premier Rhapsody and Brahms's F minor sonata. And then the second half, we're going to run with the blockchain.
The second half is the point of departure is simple songs. And so we've taken tunes by my friend, the saxophonist and composer John Zorn, a song written by a very close mutual friend of ours, Kinan Azmeh, the Syrian clarinetist. We have some of the klezmer repertoire. We have a piece also by a mutual friend, a Serbian composer Aleksandra Vrebalo. And so we have all these pieces that work together very beautifully. It's more of a world music second half. So we go from a very almost conventional classical first half do this kind of world music set. And this is an acoustic version of a duo project that Kathy and I are working on now. And we're hoping that in about a year we're going to have the fully, well, let's say the next step, because already we're presenting it in an acoustic version, which is fully realized. But we're going to add a sound designer and start to really explode the thing from the inside out, so that then we could go from a little, just a very simple duo of a clarinet and piano, but also with different extended techniques. Kathy throws inside the piano, plucks and strums and gently hits it, or sometimes not so gently, but never damaging the piano, of course, and some very interesting preparations, again, things put inside the piano that just tickle the strings but don't hurt them. So there's prepared piano. I have extended techniques, and on the clarinet that I do circular breathing, alternate fingers. So the sound world, the sound palette that we're bringing forward is already quite venturous. But then we're going to start adding electronics, so we could take that already altered sound palette and then just make it symphonic, because then we can take so many layers and so many parts and just we can do whatever we want. We could have 100 parts, we could sample strings, we could have a whole symphony orchestra.
But also content strings like that.
Yes,
so
right.
The whole concept is to be able to build it up from what we have, because already that is in the inside of a piano, you have an entire sound world built in there. That, and so the electronic version of it will be very, very, orchestrally conceived and using the loops and things like that, as well as looking at the inside. So. But for this one, we're still very excited to have the acoustic version of it and to be able to play around with what are essentially some beautiful, beautiful songs that we have, and then to be able to work with them in our own way and bring our own sound to it.
Yeah, I think that people for the Niederberg concert are really going to hear. They're going to be in on it on the ground floor, and then they'll say like, oh, maybe next year we'll come back and hear the whole the project transformed in different ways. So it's very exciting.
I think it's always exciting. It's always exciting when you take something that's written and then you build on it. And as you say, the piano is such a broad instrument. When you start experimenting with it, I can't speak for the clarinet, but I can only imagine when you get creative on it, you can make anything do anything. So I'm looking forward to that one. That's at the Niederberg. So just to sum up your concerts, you've got the two performances, is it, of the Messiaen Brahms at the Endler Hall and the Baxter, is that correct?
Yes.
And then the Niederberg concert, which is the experimental Janacek, and then some other bits and pieces, and experimental acoustic explorations at the Niederberg Hall, and that's in Paarl. And just one more thing, is there a website that we can read up about this, more about?
Yes, absolutely. Just www.davidkrakauer.com.
Yeah, that's DAVIDKRAKAUER.com. One word, no dot between my first and last name, and then.
And I'm at www.kathleenTagg.com. KATHLENTAGG.com.
Yes. And
Great. Thank you so much. And one last question. Sorry, one last question. David, you said something a little earlier that I wanted to come back to. How is the clarinet the electric guitar of klezmer?
Well, it just is. It's it's a solo instrument. It rips, it cries, it screams. It's very intense. Not just like the solo line, you know, the melody instrument. It's a very impassioned, wild, crazy animal of a solo instrument in klezmer music. And you can even, you know, if you go, my source material, when I got into this music, I went back to old 78 recordings from the 1920s, because that's actually how the music survived the Holocaust, basically. This music came over when my relatives came over in the early, late 19th century, early 20th century, and basically there was a huge wave of immigration to the United States. I think something like 2 million Jewish people came from Eastern Europe to the United States. And so, of course, they were homesick. They wanted to preserve their culture. So there were about 878 recordings made. There was a big Yiddish theater that was established. It was a real thriving culture. That culture doesn't exist as you know anymore. But at that time, in the early 20th century, it was a hopping, vital culture. And so those 78 records were the way for my generation to actually learn this music and learn it anew. And then many of us said to ourselves, let's do something different with it. We're Americans. We have funk and jazz and hip-hop and all these sounds in our ears. We walk down the street. So let's put that in the music. And so that's what we did, and we modernized this music and we made it contemporary, you know, and I've done everything from, you know, leading bands, to being a soloist in symphony orchestra for composers who were inspired by this. I did a major recording with the Kronos Quartet, a piece by Osvaldo Golicov called The Dreams and Prayers of Isaac the Blind, which I also just recently recorded with a string orchestra called The Far Cry, based in Boston, a conductorless, incredible conductorless string orchestra. Recorded the work again in that version. So for me, this music has been a point of departure, jumping off place. So, you know, the duo with Kathy is another step in this great adventure, and it sort of makes it, you know, it makes it like kind of, how can I say, it's a different step from it just playing folk music. You know, the playing of folk music is amazing, but then you can take it, go into the realm of classical composition, of leading bands. I collaborated with James Brown's trombonist and arranger, Fred Wesley, along with a friend of mine named So Called, who's a Canadian hip-hop producer and you know, multi-instrumentalist. So these kinds of things are really, really exciting, and to take the music of my ancestors and then just go in a million different directions with it. So yes, with electric guitar in hand, the clarinet as electric guitar, it's been a wild ride so far, and I anticipate many, many more years of rocking it with the clarinet.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing it. Thank you so much for the interview, David Krakauer and Kathy Tagg, and I hope to see you at the concert. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.